Just jumping in here quickly to let you guys know that I have recently created a Facebook group for listeners of the Live, Train, Perform podcast. So this private forum is the place to connect with other podcast listeners and guests, as well as to interact with myself and other coaches who have provided content for the Coach's Corner episodes. So in this forum, you can ask questions, which I can then answer in the group, or I can use them for episodes for my Q&A sessions, post relevant articles, you can share memes. The goal is to create a network of like-minded people so that everyone can interact with each other. You guys, the listeners, the audience members, can interact with a network of professionals in the fitness industry that have provided good quality content for the podcast. To gain access to this private group, all you need to do is leave me a rating and review. What this does is allows me to bump up the ratings, draw bigger names, bigger guests to the podcast for your listening pleasure. Once you've left a rating and review, take a screenshot of that, send that through to my Instagram at coach_Kobes, Kobes. Once you've done that, go onto Facebook, type in Live, Train, Perform. That group will come up, request access, answer the 3 questions, and I will grant you access. I am in the process of building out my online business. One of the income streams is going to be from the Facebook forum. So I'm going to be allowing 50 people into that forum for free. After that, it will be paid access only. So get in early, be one of the OGs. Thanks, guys. Much appreciated. And we're back again. Sean Kober of the Live, Train, Perform podcast, Jamie O'Donnell. We've recorded 2 hours of conversation already today. Mate, I love chatting to you. I decided to check in with you, see if you had the time to get back on and discuss some of the elements of our last conversation where we went through your journey of your transformation. We talked about some of the discipline components. We talked about gratitude, perspective, appreciation, etc. There was a number of things that I wrote down during that conversation that I wanted to go back to, but the flow of the conversation kept going. I didn't want to disrupt it. It was a fucking awesome conversation, man. I really enjoyed it. We've had a 5-minute break, poured myself another coffee, had a piss. You went and told the missus that you're going to be recording again. So, mate, I really appreciate it, man. I know it's late for you in New Zealand. I'm recording this at midday today. On Friday, what is it, the 5th of November? What's that make it 9 o'clock at your place? 9 p.m.?
Just gone 9, yeah.
Bro, I really appreciate it, man. But I love chatting to you, and I think it's really valuable, everything that you're bringing to this conversation. And I think the audience is going to take a lot away from not only the last couple of conversations, but this one as well. So, mate, what I want to discuss is some of the components you talked about in the last episode. And something you mentioned was using the ice bath as a circuit breaker to, build that cornerstone habit, which then had a flow-on effect to other important habits throughout the day for you. Now, something that came up for me as you were talking about the ice bath and doing that every day, along with the breath work first thing in the morning to start your day, was discipline. Now, I'm sure there were days where you didn't want to get in the ice bath and you didn't want to do it. You wanted to, fuck that off or stay in bed or whatever it was. Like, talk to me about that process. How did you build that discipline? And how did you talk yourself through that process of fucking getting it done and being accountable to yourself?
Yeah, cool, man. I'm actually glad that we circled back around to this because it didn't do justice to the importance of the ice bath in the last conversation. And we sort of said cornerstone habit and that, but there's 2 aspects to it. There's the health side of ice bathing, and then there's the mental side. And the mental side is unbelievably important, man. And like for me, I think I said in the last one that I knew I needed a circuit breaker. Like you don't put on 10 kilos of extra weight and carry that around without being a bit fluffy mentally, like you're a bit fluffy physically, but if you're a bit fluffy phically, you're probably a bit fluffy mentally as well. And you're not quite.
It's a reflection.
Exactly. It's the most accurate reflection. It doesn't lie. And I guess, I pride myself on my level of discipline and kind of mental toughness and a few of those key characteristics. They're character traits that I value. And I had to admit that if I was carrying around 10 extra kilos, I probably wasn't exercising them as well as I could be. And for me, the ice bath was like the ultimate, it was the ultimate test of like mental strength because it's horrific sitting in ice, in freezing cold ice for however long you choose to sit in. And so when I first did it, it was literally, I knew that it was the hardest thing that I could do. Like I knew the level of discipline that I needed from a nutrition perspective and a training perspective, I knew that there was no room. I said that in the last episode, there was no 80%. It had to be 100%. But I hadn't got 100% out of myself for a period of time. And I was like, I need to like find the hardest shit that I can possibly do. And I need to prove that I can do that, because then the other stuff will be easy.
But it was also achievable.
Yeah, totally.
Because you've done it before, and you were preparing yourself mentally for it ahead of time. So, I think that's a great point to pause on for a moment as well, is, we need stress in our lives.
Yeah.
Stress is what allows us to adapt.
Yeah.
However, too much stress then creates anxiety and it decreases performance. Just enough stress can actually improve performance. This is where, we talked earlier about Peter Yan going into the octagon, winning the UFC interim bantamweight title over the weekend. Mate, I was fucking nervous for him, man, like going into the octagon, but like it was those butterflies, it was excitement. Like it wasn't overwhelming where I'm like, oh fuck, I don't want to be here. It was just like, like this is really exciting. Everything that we've worked for over the last, 10 weeks or so is being put on display tonight. And, I'm sure you felt that before during, different pursuits, whether it's in sport or whether it's in business or other areas of your life, etc. I think people need to understand that stress is important. Most people try and reduce stress. Yeah, stress needs to be reduced at times if it is overwhelming, but stress is also essential for adaptation.
Chronic stress needs to be reduced. Like, chronic stress is not good. And that underlying low-level chronic stress over time, it contributes to disease and all sorts of stuff. But you're exactly right. Like, you have to have a level of stress, and you have to build your resilience to it. And it's like in the gym, mate, like you don't get stronger unless you stress the muscles, right? But stressing them too much is destructive. And so it's the exact same thing. But I think the reality of probably the world that we live in today is that we spend most of our time trying to avoid stress and create these stressful lives, which actually just weaken us across the board. And for me, like I felt like that's what had happened. I felt like to get where I was physically, don't get me wrong, there was underlying health problems as well. So I'm not being too harsh on myself when I say it, but like I had also just not, I created bad habits as well, and I was feeling a bit weak. And part of the ice bath for me was snapping that and going, do something that you really don't want to do and do it consistently. And also the science of it, man. Like, there's no black or white as to whether an ice bath is good for you from a mental perspective. Like, anyone who follows Wim Hof or any of his work or anything like that, like, it's pretty straightforward. The chemical reactions that are going on, you're getting the right dump of hormones. Like, there's, improving your vascular health. Like, there's always things that are black and white. And so for me, there was health benefits to it. And then there was like, I knew that I needed to get myself in a better mental space. I knew that like I was feeling pretty low and pretty exhausted. And I knew that I needed to, like, I'm going to say, rebalance the chemical stack, because there was stuff that was clearly a little bit off. And through breath work, the combination of breath work and ice bath, I knew by reading the books and studying it that would happen. It wasn't like, maybe I'll feel better. I was like, I know I'll feel better if I do this.
Yeah. Reading the books and, the articles and listening to the podcast and gathering information is different to actually taking action and fucking doing things. Yeah. Now, I'm sure there was times...
Sorry, just on that point, that comes back to how badly you want the change. Like, I got into a position where it wasn't really an option anymore. And it was, but like, one thing that you can do in those situations is that you can stack all the things that I literally just like, in order to create the level of importance that I needed to get my head around, I literally just on a piece of paper wrote down everything that it was costing me to feel and be where I was, like relationship wise, financially, business, experiences, confidence, like everything, like fucking list. I don't know how many things I got down, but like truckloads.
You legit wrote all that stuff down?
Wrote it down on a piece of paper. Like, this is what it's costing me to be where I am, like to feel like this. And then I was like, I know that I can change that by hopping in an ice bath. So it got way easier when I looked at that list.
Mate, that's brilliant, man. Like, I think we discussed, we actually listened to our recent podcast. Oh, sorry. I listened to our first podcast recently. That's still one of my favorite conversations, man. I've said it before and I'll say it again. And, one of the big things that I took away from that conversation was, you saying, people negotiate too hard with themselves and then they accept those standards and, it becomes a slippery slope. And I absolutely love that conversation, man. It's something that I implement into my coaching all the time with my own clients. This is the cool thing about this podcast is I get to talk to people like you who have come from your own background, your own experience and your own journey, man. And, I'm getting to learn from you, but I'm getting to learn from all of these other coaches. And I'm taking little bits and pieces, man, from everything you guys are saying, and I'm implementing that into my coaching style. I think that's really fucking cool, man. One of the things that I want to talk about is that discipline. There were times where you're like, I don't want to get in the ice bath. How did you get over that mental barrier to actually get in the ice bath and go, well, I know this is fucking right for me? Again, we do negotiate with ourselves. So how do you, what tools do you use to go through that process when you are negotiating with yourself to be like, no, you need to fucking do this. Instead of taking the easy road, take the fucking harder option.
Yeah, totally. One of them is stacking up what it's costing. So that's one thing. Because I think a lot of the time we numb ourselves to what's actually going on. And so then, you've said this before, but if you don't really have a strong why and you're not really connected to why you're doing something, your level of commitment to it is probably going to be much lower than what it could be. So I think when you stack, when I wrote down all that shit on the paper, you have to stare at what it's actually costing you. And so your level of commitment instantly goes up towards, to the upper echelons, because it's very present what it's going to cost you if you don't do it. And then for me, it's outside accountability. I'd hired a coach and I had told him what I was going to do because, like I said in that previous episode, people get really good at negotiating with themselves. We all do. I got really good at negotiating with myself, and I needed outside accountability. And I don't think you need a coach every single waking moment of your life, but I think there's seasons in your life where you do need a coach. And I was in a season where I really needed that outside accountability, and for stuff that I would have probably normally done quite easily previously, but I knew that I needed it in this period. So between stacking and really understanding the importance of it and the pain of it, of where I was at, and knowing that I could change it by getting in the ice bath and doing stuff, that made it easier. Having outside accountability where I knew that I told my coach that I was going to do this discipline and I was going to implement this as a protocol, and that he was checking in on me. Also, my partner, Steph, knew that I was doing that as well. And so she was there. I couldn't bullshit. And I guess there's little habits, things like you touched on it in the last episode, but things like you don't have to get in the ice bath. You have to get out of your clothes. Or, just what's the first step? It's not actually getting in the ice bath. How often do you...
So that's the result.
Yeah, so for me, one of the key things was lying down on the yoga mat to do the breath work, because I'd do the Wim Hof breath work first, and then I'd hop in the ice bath. Now, I know that there was never a period of time, no matter how much resistance I had to the ice, where I would do the breathing and then not hop it. So it was actually about getting on the mat.
That's the habit loop, bro.
Yeah. So getting on the mat,
you've got the cue,
easier,
the routine, the reward.
Yeah, and if you wind it back even before that, to be fair, I have a decent amount of resistance to doing breath work as well. I know it takes 15, 20 minutes. You've got to output a lot of energy. I find that quite a hard habit to stick with. And I know the importance of it. And it's really, I can honestly say breath work consistently on a daily basis has changed my life. But it's not even about doing the breath work necessarily. It's what's the steps before the breath work? Is it just laying the mat down, the yoga mat down? And by the time you get the yoga mat and put it down, you're already committed and you're in the process. You've got a bit of momentum towards doing it. You typically find that when you do those first little small things, if you're trying to go for a bigger run, maybe just getting your shoes on is the first thing. Or, I think you used this example of one of your clients where I think the first thing that you said, I think it was you, and you said, just go to the gym. You don't even have to work out, just get through the front door. Yeah. And I think that's a big part of it as well. And then the other side of it is just the mental framing of it. I went into a war with my inner bitch every day and I enjoyed it. I framed it up before I did it. I was I know that you need to do this. And it was I would just fight with myself, and I fell in love with the process of conquering that. I framed that up as a exciting challenge to do. And
a challenge,
the reality is, bro, in all the studies into human happiness and high performance, there's 4 fundamental drivers that keep coming through. And like one of those 4 fundamental drivers of human happiness is challenge. And if you look across the board, like the things that are the hardest that you've achieved in your life make you feel the best. And so why do you feel good when you hop out of an ice bath? Well, yes, there's a whole chemical thing going on in the background. Like you've got all these great hormones rushing around, but you also just achieve something that's bloody hard, and that challenge actually is one of the fundamental drivers of human happiness. And the more that you can build healthy challenge into your life, that helps you to create sustained levels of joy and happiness.
Yeah, that's brilliant, man. And, going back to that conversation, like you are not negotiating with yourself. Like, hey, I'm getting in the ice bath. This is what I've chosen to do. I'm going to be accountable to myself. I'm going to be accountable to other people. I understand the science behind what that's going to give me. It's going to give me a return on my investment. But, you're kicking that off with a ritual prior to actually getting in the ice bath. Being in the ice bath is like the result of that ritual that leads you up to that.
Yeah.
And that ritual might be, your morning routine. You get out of bed, you open the blinds, you go out, you get some fresh air, and then you're like, all right, within 5 minutes, or you go and brush your teeth, whatever, within 5 minutes, I'm going to be on the yoga mat.
Yeah.
And you build that into your life, and it just becomes a habit, man. And then you get there and like you don't feel like doing it. You want to go and, skip that, go and get some food, but then you're like, hey, this is part of who I am. Am I going to negotiate with myself, or am I going to fucking follow through on the promise that I've set to myself?
Yeah, 100%. And I talked about that in the first episode we did together. It was like the fastest way to destroy your confidence is to break the promises you make to yourself. And that's a saying that I've always held on to. And, you have that stuff in the back of your head. And I really place value on that statement. And I feel bad when I don't do stuff that I've said that I'm going to do. And so, all of that culminates. But in all honesty, man, at the end of the day, like I guess we can talk around discipline and like come up with tactics and stuff, but it's like just start. Like we can talk about the habits and all that shit, but like lying down on the mat and doing the first breath or something is the difference. And for me, when I actually think like you've got me to reflect on that process, but the breath work was the first thing, and it's like just fucking start. Like just take the first breath, or just do the first thing. Like just take the clothes off and get close to there's just a start point for stuff. And just start. The sooner you start and you get momentum, the easier it is. And then with the discipline aspect of it, man, it's still just as hard. I mean, it does get easier a little bit because your body actually starts, they say after about a 10-day period, your body actually starts looking for that cold. And so as opposed to like wanting to run away from it, you actually get this weird craving to go towards it. But it's the same.
Because you feel like the benefits from it, you understand the return on that investment.
Yeah.
And again, sorry to cut you off, mate, but just, as you said, like you're just taking one step at a time. That first step is roll that yoga mat out. The second step is lay down. The third step is close your eyes. The fourth step is take a breath. That's it. And then the next step is roll the yoga mat up. Next step is get in the fucking ice bath.
Yeah. And like the step into the ice bath is always an interesting one because like you'll do the breath work and then you kind of like, have 30 seconds after you do your breath work, you sort of come to, you feel a little bit high.
I could leave it there. I feel good.
And then you've got to open the lid and then you've got to look at it and it's all fucking cold and icy and unappealing and you're like, whew. And then you sort of have this period where you've got to step into it. But like, if you hesitate, it gets harder and harder and harder. And so just don't hesitate. Like, just take
You can't
step.
flinch, bro. That's that flinch test, man. If you flinch, then it's game over. You got to just fucking accept it, man, and jump in.
And it's like, I don't know if you've read Mel Robbins' 5 second rule, but it's a great book. No. And her entire method is around 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you do it. So like, if you're hitting snooze in the morning, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch yourself, and just that 5 second period is the period of time where it takes for your conscious brain to take over and for you to rationalize and make excuses. And so you've got to short circuit that by doing it within the first 5 seconds. And she's got an entire book on it, and it's the most simple concept in the world, but it works and it's based on science. It's like, that's how the brain works. And so there's an element of just that as well. It's just like open the lid and just take the first step in and don't allow yourself to have that level of negotiation or that hesitancy because it's only downhill from there.
Yeah.
But it's still a battle. And like every habit, like once you've really got to conquer the first 14 to 21 days, don't you? Like, once you
That's
get
where the magic is.
Yeah, once you build the habit and once you get in the routine of it, it's much easier to maintain a habit than it is to build it. And so I think often we actually think too big about a lot of that stuff, and we're like, oh, I've got to do an ice bath every day. And it's kind of like this huge thing. It's like, what if you just did 14 in a row? What if you just did 7 in a row? Or what if you just did 5 in a row? And then when you get to 5 in a row, it's unlikely that you're like, oh, I'm going to stop. You just do another 5 in a row. And so, like, you teach this to your clients, like chunking down your goals into small little doable things that seem less overwhelming and very achievable. And it's like, that's a good little mental trick as well, is just chunk it down and go, I'm going to do 3 ice baths in a row, and then like do 3 ice baths in a row and then reassess. And like, where are you at? And then do 3 more, and then do 3 more. And all of a sudden you've done 21 ice baths and you're away, you know? So I guess that's a simple little trick as well, because sometimes when you commit to big stuff, it's paralyzing.
Yeah, absolutely. Something you spoke about there was you touched on pain points, and you said like moving away from where you were, like you were overweight, you were unhealthy. I want to talk about motivation direction because, a lot of people, when they look at motivation direction, they want to move away from something. I'm this weight and I'm too heavy, or I'm unhealthy, I don't feel attractive, whatever. Like, I want to move away from this weight. But then once people get far enough away from, that pain point, then they stop. Whereas motivation direction towards something is where you're constantly looking ahead. Now, I personally think that motivation direction away from and towards are both important at different times of your life. Now, I'm assuming that when you went through the initial transformation process where you did come to that realization that you were a little bit heavier than normal, your energy levels were a little bit low, you felt it affecting your relationship with Steph, you were like, all right, I want to move away from this point here. I need to do X, Y, Z. I need to tighten up my nutrition. I need to get back into training. I maybe need to, dial in my evening routine, my morning routine, etc., etc. Once you got to a certain point, then I'm assuming, things didn't work out or unfold the way that you thought it was going to. You didn't get the effect that you wanted. And then you went, all right, well, I'm missing something here. What's the piece of the jigsaw puzzle that's missing? I don't know what that is right now. I'm going to employ someone to do that. Then you started working with other coaches, and then it became more of like that moving towards motivation.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, pain's the greatest motivator, right? So there's lots of times that I can think of in my life where I've really wanted something and I still haven't actioned it to the level that I need to get the result. And like, I'm talking like really wanted something, but the pain probably wasn't quite enough for me to get that initial momentum. And so with this one, mate, like, it's the first time I've ever faced health problems in my life. And if it was just I think the underlying thing was that it was, as much as I said it was just a weight loss thing and I wanted to lose weight, and that I knew that something was off. I knew that my gut health wasn't right. I intuitively knew that I wasn't well. And it's the first time I've ever dealt with health issues in my life. And the pain of that was fucking massive. I'd watched my brother go through chronic Crohn's, in and out of hospital for 5 years, multiple operations, had his bowel cut out, all sorts of shit. And the fear and the pain of thinking about potentially going down anywhere near that path was enough to fucking kick me into gear. And then it's funny because if I reflect on it now, like, I'm maybe 6 months or 5 months down the track, and like, I'm 11 kilos lighter, my energy levels are great. Like, I'm still rebuilding my gut health. Like, it doesn't happen overnight, and I'll probably be on that protocol and doing stuff for the next year to 2 years, probably realistically, to try and get everything back to full. But now, when I genuinely check in with myself right now, it's about getting that really, and just maintaining that really good quality of life. Like, I feel really good again, and I'm motivated by that. So that is a different motivation, because I'm not trying to get away from the pain of feeling unwell anymore. I'm trying to get the feeling of feeling really good. So that has transitioned over a 5-month period.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And that's a great takeaway for the audience as well, is like, a lot of people won't make big decisions and big changes until something happens that causes them pain. Like, when it comes to health, for example, people won't make a change in their life until, they have a fucking heart attack, or, they get diagnosed with, an illness or disease or cancer or whatever it is, like, people aren't being proactive with their health because they've just learned to accept that quality of life, and they don't remember what it feels like to fucking feel good all the time. 100%. Whereas when you do take care of business and you do feel good the majority of the time, when things start slipping, maybe it takes 6 months, a year and a half, 2 years, but then you get to a point where you're like, fuck man, I don't feel as good as I used to. Like, what do I need to do to get back to that point? And so many people, they get to this point where they want to make a change, it creeps up on them, and then it fucking hits them in the face when they jump on the scales and they're 20 kilos overweight, and, they feel like shit, and their partner's just left them, their, self-esteem and confidence levels are low. And it's not until they get on the scales and they look in the mirror and they're like, fuck, what happened? And then they start trying to make changes, and then they think, there's 5 years that these good habits have slowly, crept out of their life, and these bad habits have crept in, and it's this frog in the pan analogy, right? Like, people don't realize that it has been a slippery slope, and they've slipped further and further down that slope, and then they try and make these big changes and they try and do everything at once, and it's like 5 years of poor lifestyle decisions and factors is not going to be undone in fucking a 6-week challenge.
No, not at all, man. And like, there's a couple of things just to look back to there, but like, well, just on that point that you've just raised there, like getting your feedback or your sense of self-esteem from ticking and just being in the process, like being in the journey, is super important. Because if you're only focused on the outcome, like I don't think I really lost any weight initially for maybe like 6 weeks, maybe like a kilo or something. Like, it was slow at the beginning, but I felt so fucking good about ticking off all the rituals I said I was going to tick off. Like, I got so much pride, momentum, fulfillment, confidence from doing what I said I was going to do. And it didn't matter. Yeah. Like, I literally, like, I had the coach and he was like, oh, we can drop your calories like we haven't. And I was like, bro, I don't give a fuck, because I'm doing what I said I was going to do, and I feel awesome. And like,
you felt good about yourself. This goes back to exactly what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Was it last episode or this episode? We're talking about the subjective measurements rather than the objective measurements.
Yeah. And so like, you can always, again, it comes back to measuring the right stuff, but like, doing what you said you're going to do is the fastest way to build confidence. Breaking those promises that you make to yourself is the fastest way to destroy it. And you feel great when you just get into the routine of doing something you haven't been doing, when you know that eventually it's going to pay off. And you talked about investment earlier when it came to your journey with Peter. But like, it's the same thing. Like, I knew that if I just continued to do what I was doing and I just showed up with the same level of discipline that I'd proven to myself that I had and that I could achieve every day. I knew that if I just continued to do that over and over and over a decent period of time, and I wasn't impatient, that I would get there. And we live in a world where instant gratification is just everywhere. Like, this week, I watched a TV series with my partner, Steph, that I just caught up on, and they release the episodes every week. And I just about threw a tantrum. I was like, I have to wait 7 days for a fucking episode to drop. I haven't had to do that for like 4 years. But it was like one of those moments where I was like, what the fuck, 7 days? And then I was like, well, that's how fast we've got there. And I'm like, no wonder people can't stick to their health and fitness goals or do hard shit over a long period of time. Because like, I was shocked that I had to wait 7 days for this fucking Netflix episode to drop. And like, we laugh about it, but it's true,
100%.
And so I think, like, for me, I genuinely just focused on, I know that I got through that early stage by just focusing on ticking the boxes every day and just doing what I said I was going to do. And I felt awesome just on the back of that. And yeah, I hadn't lost much weight in the early stages, but my energy levels had changed, and like, my mental fog had cleared up a bit, and I was in the routine of the ice bath, and I had massive momentum already, bro. And it wasn't about the scale at that point. I felt way better, and I felt way better, which gave me the belief that it was going to work. And I don't know if you've ever tapped into that potential belief action cycle, but like, literally, the basic, I'm paraphrasing it here, but you only take the level of action based on the level of belief that you have that something's going to work, right? So like if you don't really believe, like if I give you a system to follow and you're like 50-50 on it, you're going to take like 50% action on it. You're going to dip your toes in the water. What happens when you dip your toes in the water? You get like a little bit of a result or no result because you only dipped your toes in the water, which means that your belief then goes down, which means you take less action, which means you have less belief and you end up in this downward spiral. But
which is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. But when you go the opposite way and you have a high level of belief and you've got like conviction that this is going to work, like you said before, like you've done the research, you understand it, you know that it's going to work. So your belief's really high. So then you take a huge amount of action on it. And what happens when you take a huge amount of action is that you get a big result, which makes your belief go through the fucking roof, which makes your action go through the roof. And that becomes a big upward cycle. And when you understand that cycle, you've pretty much just got to work out how to tap into the upward cycle, not the downward one. But I think a lot of people are always in the downward one. And to be honest, that's super simple because it's like all you've got to do is go, how do I increase my belief that this is going to work for me? Now, maybe if you're hiring a coach that's looking through all their testimonials and just being like, he knows what he's doing, like a complete confidence in the coach. Maybe if you're someone like me, you want to go and do a bit of research because you need to understand it yourself so that you know that there's, you understand the method of why you're doing what you're doing. And then once you've gathered that information, whether it's on the system or the coach or whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, and you get your belief to a certain level, you take the action, and typically you get the result,
Yeah, man. Yeah, that ties back into investment, right? Like if you're going to invest in something, make sure you're investing in the right thing. And if you are going to invest in that thing, like, you should be investing in things that you actually believe in, that you are going to put your trust in the process and have faith that the process is what's going to give you the outcome. Because like, that's where the magic is, man. Like the magic is on the journey, figuring out what works, what doesn't work, and, following the principles, applying different methods. Something I always say is like good coaches are going to take similar paths to get people to the same outcome. Right. But, every coach is going to be different as long as we understand that, hey, this is my left of arc. This is my right of arc. I'm here right now. That's my end state over there. Like I might take this path. You might take that path. Someone else might take this path. Like everyone's going to be taking slightly different paths. But at the end of the day, like the principles are going to remain the same.
Totally, bro. And look, there's nothing about the losing 11 kilos, getting my energy back, feeling good about myself. There's nothing complicated about what I did. It was going back to basics on nutrition, just getting into a good routine of training, making sure my sleep was good, making sure my stress levels were right. Like, all the really basic shit. But then also doing the
testing as well.
Yeah, totally. And checking in and having accountability. There's a few things there, but like going back to your point, it's the actual way to get somewhere is usually the simplest thing.
By doing.
Yeah, it's just by doing. It's just by following the proven principles. And I don't know, man. I think we overcomplicate things massively for ourselves a lot of the time.
Yeah, 100%, man. That's a topic that we could like spend a lot of time on, but I prefer not to because we've spoken about this before. I've spoken about this with many other coaches. Like, you don't need to look for the flashy stuff that looks cool on fucking social media. Like stick to the tried and true tested methods that have been around for a fucking long time. There's a lot of evidence that stuff works. It's not sexy, but hey, do you want to do something sexy like every 6 months and get fucking nowhere? Or do you want to do the boring shit that's going to lead you to long-term sustainable fucking outcomes for the rest of your life?
Exactly, man. Exactly.
Pretty simple equation in my mind, mate.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But I can't sell anything, man. Hey, bro. Hey, I'm going to speak to my online clients. Hey, man, mate, you're only getting 6 hours sleep. Maybe let's try and bump you up to 6.5 hours sleep a night for the next. Let's talk about some tactics that's going to allow you to do that. All right, you can do that for a month. Cool. Let's get you up to 7 hours sleep. Oh, you're only drinking a liter of water. Let's get you up to a liter and a half. That shit doesn't sell, bro.
No, I know. That's half the problem. It's like, and again, just going back to that belief thing, everyone jumps from flashy diet to flashy diet, but under it, like everyone, no one's that stupid. Like everyone knows. So when you try those stuff, a lot of the time your belief's really low. And again, that belief action result cycle kicks in, So I don't know, man, tried and true. For me, it comes back to just discipline, like with all of it. Like you said, the simple stuff's not sexy and it just requires a bit of mundane, doing the same thing and just getting into good routine. And like you say, that's not sexy to market and to sell, or to think about doing, but it is what makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Now, I want to transition to, I did mention testing before, being a big part of your transformation as well, because that testing then allowed you to have a closer look at things that you maybe couldn't see on a surface level. And that testing then, opened the door for potentially different protocols that could be used and individualized to you. Now, when you went through that testing protocol, let's talk about the testing protocol first, and then we did touch on it in one of the earlier episodes, but let's go through the testing protocols and then the information that gave you, and then how that shaped the decisions on what the elimination diet looked like. And we'll discuss what an elimination diet is, how an elimination diet works, and why it is important to, have a look at, nutrition as a whole and how it affects your digestive system, which then affects, every other system in the body.
Yeah, totally, man. Like I said, we did the stool sample. So, there was a couple of things, right? When you talk about testing, people probably go straight towards like actual testing, but even just doing the intake form was testing to a certain degree, right? And so there was a lot of information that presented me where I had to look at things there, and that also gave the coach a lot of stuff. But then with Katie, we did the stool sample and we did the nasal swab and the methane breath test, which gives you a truckload of data. And the stool sample in particular that we did was like she's very clued up. I don't know exactly the name of the test, but it was like one of the newest ones that have come out. And the depth of it was like literally all the things that you're resistant to from an antibiotic perspective, good bacteria and how much, like what was overgrown, what was missing, like pathogens, is that the right term? And then the bacteria, and then what else was there in there? There was like I said, right down to cancer markers. It was in depth, man. But I guess from where I was at and what mattered, it was around the balance of the bacteria in my gut. And there was shit was all over the show. It was like, as Katie said, it was like a nuclear bomb had been detonated, and lots of the good stuff was eliminated, lots of the bad stuff was overgrown, candida, all sorts of stuff going on. And so on the back of that, I'd had lots of food intolerances, things that I never used to have. Like I never had any problems with any food groups ever. And all of a sudden I was like getting bloated and cramping and all sorts of stuff going on from like real basic stuff, onion, garlic. And so we just stripped right back. And I said to you before, like off camera, I actually did a period where I was full carnivore and literally just went back to just eating meat. And there was a period there where Katie got me to do that, and she was like literally without even spices for a bit. She was like, even like testing has shown that even like spices and stuff can affect your microbiome, and so let's get right back to like meat. And that was, you want to talk about discipline, and like that's way harder than getting in an ice bath, man. But that essentially eliminates everything, and then you can just reintroduce stuff slowly. So I did a 2-week period where it was just like strict carnivore. And during that 2-week period, I never thought, for a start, just to put it out there because it sounds out the gates, but like I never ever thought that I would entertain the idea of going full carnivore. That's a big transition for me. Like that's extreme, but it required it. And during that 2-week period, like all my symptoms disappeared.
I just want to pause there for a sec. We'll come back to this in a moment, but like I understand what's going on, but I want to extract the lessons for the listeners as well. Why was the recommendation to go carnivore to kick off the elimination diet?
Yeah, just as a reset. I think it's the best way, from what I understand anyway, is the best way to kind of do a full reset of your gut. And so that was the reason for doing a 2-week period on it. And maybe you can explain more about that in terms of like what's actually happening there in terms of the gut microbiome. But from what I understand, it's just the best way to do a complete reset and not influence that too much.
Yeah, man. A lot of food intolerances come up from like gluten and shellfish and peanuts and like lactose and certain types of grains and things like that. Some people even have intolerances to FODMAPs, which is like vegetables. So you can look at vegetables and be like, vegetables are good, right? But then, some of the sugars and the polyphenols in the vegetables then create an issue with food intolerances, and can potentially, if you're not chewing your food correctly, then that food's not getting broken down correctly, and then those nutrients aren't being extracted, and then that can create like a slowdown. It can slow down the process of the like within the digestive tract. So then maybe some of those vegetables are fermenting in like the small intestine.
Yeah,
can
sitting
get
in your
caught between
colon.
the small. Yeah, exactly, man. Get caught between the small intestine, the large intestine, and then there's like a flap between the two. And sometimes those vegetables can sit there and ferment and create bacterial overgrowth and all that type of stuff. So yeah, there's so many different ways that food intolerances can be created. So the point of the elimination diet is there's a couple of different ways to do the elimination diet. So that's why I was interested in asking you on how you went about it, because one way of doing it is just fucking going balls deep and eliminating every potential trigger to these intolerances. And that is literally fucking removing everything and keeping it really simple with, just meats. Mm-hmm. Even eggs can be an intolerance as well. Fruits and vegetables can be an intolerance, or create intolerances. So that's one way of doing it. And then another way of doing it is identifying certain foods that you're eating, or identifying certain periods of time where you're having issues with your digestive system, gas, indigestion, bloating, poor energy levels, crashes, et cetera, and then looking back at the food that you've eaten prior to that, and then trying to identify potential triggers that were creating an inflammatory response and an immune response, and then eliminating those things and eliminating one thing at a time. But it sounds like you just went balls deep and went straight into like a full deep elimination diet, and then... Sorry, go on.
The problem with doing the other way is that it's like finding a needle in a haystack. Like, it's hard to know and to pinpoint, and sometimes there's inconsistencies as well, right? Like sometimes you'll eat, say, some onion and be fine, and then another time you end up in like chronic pain when you had onion, and you're like, what the hell?
But maybe that was onion and garlic together.
Exactly. And so by going just all in and just going to a complete like carnivore straight away, you've got your start point really quickly. You're not mucking around with anything else. Mm-hmm.
I just want to pause you there for a second. We'll come back to this in a moment, but I think that's a great point that kind of ties in something we mentioned earlier about the difference between acute and the chronic, right? Like if you had potentially identified these issues, year and a half ago or whatever, when you felt your energy levels start dropping, maybe you could have gone through that soft approach to the elimination diet 100%. And had a look at certain things and been like, all right, well, when I eat this is how it makes me feel. And then you identify a potential trigger in there and you're like, all right, maybe I'll remove that for a couple of weeks and see how I feel. But because you kind of hadn't identified that and you had gone so far down that slippery slope, then you got to a point where you had to go through, a fucking hard reset with a full, like, hardcore elimination diet.
100%. And also, chuck 18 to 24 months of antibiotics and different stuff in there as well. It's like, that was just what was happening. And like, I had full trust in Katie. Like, she's unbelievable in that space. She's a top integrative nutritionist in the country. She's worked with a lot of like the All Black, like Dan Carter and people like that. She's good at what she does. And,
obviously.
Yeah. And, I was paying her to tell me what to do to a certain degree. Like you said earlier, I know there's certain things, certain knowledge and a base understanding, and then there's like you don't know what you don't know, and that was her recommendation, and I just went and did it all in. I committed to it and did it, and again, like you get instant feedback, and all of a sudden, a lot of the discomfort goes, and a lot of the symptoms that you're having disappear, and you're like, okay, we've got a start point here. Like we're in a good place, and then you can reintroduce stuff like. You bring some onion and some garlic back in, and you don't do them together. You bring one thing in, and that's fine. And then you bring something else, and then something else, and then you sort of piece it together. And at that same time, I was doing a pretty heavy supplement protocol as well. That like proper practitioner strength supplementation, and we're talking like 6, 7, 8 different things a day, like a part-time job taking your supplements, but all around repairing gut health and specific to the imbalances that I'd had through my tests. The elimination of everything right down to meat, plus the supplementation to like help repair the gut lining and to balance things out, and then building on the back of that as a foundation.
Yeah, I love that, man. Now, I just want to talk about the process of reintroducing foods as well, because I think this is important, a massively important piece of the puzzle when it comes to an elimination diet, right? Like, as you said, you don't introduce a number of foods at the same time. You may, introduce, for example, like a glass of milk, and maybe, you pay attention. If you haven't had milk for 4 weeks, okay, you have a glass of milk and you go, all right, I know that I didn't feel any indigestion, no bloating, no gassiness or anything like that. All right, cool. I'm going to do that the next day, and the next day, and the next day. All right, cool. I've done that for a couple of days. I know that I can get away with, 250 mils of milk, but then maybe you bump that up to 400 mils and you're like, I can start feeling that affecting me. So then you're not only looking at, what foods affect you, but you're also looking at how much affects you, because it's not about, completely, sometimes it is, but most of the time it's not about completely removing things. Sometimes it's about looking at what your tolerance levels are. So 100%. Then you can go, hey, as long as I stay below this level, then I'm going to be okay. But then once I start, if I have 250 mils of milk, but then I also have some cheese with that combination, maybe that's going to cause me some issues. So, you 100%. Need to look at your tolerance levels as well.
100%. And I guess the thing that was evident for me throughout that process was that a lot of the time that like, I know that I don't react that well to dairy, but I can have a bit and I'm fine, and there's no problem. But like if I have a heavy dairy meal or something, I'll know. But also like the stuff I hadn't paid attention to was probably plants, right? And there's a lot of toxins in plants. Like plants have built-in defense mechanisms to stop them from being eaten and killed. And a lot of the time you just think, plant-based is healthy, but actually a lot of the time some of that stuff is, and different for everyone, but can be causing a lot of irritation as well.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I'm just wary of the time, bro. I want to start wrapping up so you can go and have dinner. It's almost 10 o'clock there. I apologize, bro. I really appreciate your time, man. It's been a pleasure,
bro. One thing I was going to say, mate, that I haven't touched on that I think is important as well is I actually did a couple of 3-day water fasts as well. And, mate, they were awesome, mate. Like, again, not something I necessarily thought that I would ever do or hadn't even really considered. But again, like it was recommended to me. Katie actually runs like a 5-day fast. She's got a company that does, what's it called? Is it called imitation fasting? Where like they've worked out, there's like a science and they've worked out basically how to imitate the fast, but you still have a few calories a day, like a few hundred calories, and you still have certain food groups, but it doesn't break the fast. And she does a lot of this stuff with cancer. So she does a lot of work with cancer patients. And so she runs this specific program for cancer patients. Anyway, she recommended that I did it. Jack also recommended that I did a 3-day water fast. So I just dived in and did a 3-day water fast whilst, like I was in that carnivore phase as well. And so, like my body had like a full reset, and obviously, after I think it's 36 to 40 hours or something like along those lines, your body starts to go into that mode where it starts to repair, right? And all the kind of defunct cells and degenerate cells start to get repaired.
Cell autophagy,
Yeah, exactly. And your body starts, because your body's incredibly clever. Like all these mechanisms are built in. We just don't ever really activate them. And
well, that's a great point, mate. Like, when we do eat constantly, like we're breaking down, utilizing these nutrients. But if you have cells that are like growing uncontrollably that shouldn't be, like we're potentially feeding them. So this is what like having fasts is highly beneficial for health. A lot of people look at fasting for the weight loss benefits, and I'm like, man, if you're looking at fasting for weight loss, you're looking at it wrong. Like there's so many more health benefits that are way more fucking important than that. And as we mentioned earlier, like if you look after your health first, then the performance and the aesthetics come.
Yeah, I can't prove it, but I put my like hand on heart and say doing the 3-day water fast was the reason I was able to get off medication and break that antibiotic cycle. I did it right at there was a point where I had to get off them to do the testing because you can't get accurate testing while you're on any medication. So I had to break the medication cycle. Now, I couldn't go 2 days without my skin flaring up on that. So it was recommended that I did a 3-day fast over that period and use that as a kickstart to try and get off the medication. And I swear that was the reason. I've been off medication for 4 months now or something. And I swear that fast was one of the circuit breakers that really helped. And it's something that I did another one recently. I'm going to do them every 90 days and just do 3-day water fast because, as you know, all the energy that your body uses to digest food consistently goes into repairing your body and your cells. And then once you hit an extended fast, you can your body starts to actually feed on all the cells and that are not useful or could turn and could cause problems down the track. And your body's an incredibly wise system, and I think going through this whole process just made me pay way more attention and way more respect to it. And things like even doing the fasting, bro, you do 3 days on a fast, and then your awareness and your level of respect for what you then put in your body after a 3-day fast has changed. Your entire relationship with food changes. And it's probably not for everyone. I'm not going to rave and say everyone should go out and do a 3-day fast because it's not my role and it's probably not for everyone. But man, it changed my relationship to food and it made me respect the stuff that I put in my body 100 times more and pay way more attention to it.
Yeah, man. It also brings awareness to you, right? Because once you go on that water fast, you're not putting food in. It actually gives your digestive system time to clear everything out, which then makes you fucking super sensitive to any foods that are coming in, and you can then start picking up on these triggers that may create an inflammatory response, man. And you're a lot more in tune with how foods affect you. And once you get to that point, then you start connecting dots with how foods make you feel. When I eat this, it makes me feel good. When I eat this, it makes me feel shit. Okay, maybe I eat more of the stuff that makes me feel good and less of the stuff that makes me feel shit.
Yeah, and just interesting, you obviously fasting like that as well, you reset things like your ghrelin. Is it ghrelin, which is your hunger hormone? Yeah. And so that, the timing of when you're hungry and all of that, you start to realize that all of this stuff is just, it's just hormone balance, really. And you do things like that, and then all of a sudden you can cope without food. So that means that when you find yourself in a situation say you go out and you're out for a whole afternoon and normally you'd have to get something while you're out and there's no good options, so you just take a shit option because there was no good ones. Once you've done that reset, you have so much more control. So you just go, I just will wait till I get home tonight and I'll have a meal. Yeah, instead of choosing a shitty option, I know that, it's going to make me feel rubbish. Yes, I'm getting some calories in, but, it's going to be taking away from my energy levels rather than adding to it. So then you make that conscious decision ahead of time. Hey, I'm just not going to eat for a while. I'm going to, go through a period of fasting, let my digestive system clear out, knowing that I'm going to make better choices later on this afternoon or tonight and put some good, healthy, nutritious foods into my body. Yeah, 100%, man. And I guess the question that I have and, that I think is important as well is just where do you draw the line? Because you've got to live as well, right? And so for me, it was I've done 5 or 6. I've lost track of time, but it's maybe 6 months where I've been the most strict I've ever been in my life. You ask anyone around me, family dinners, I'll go to during that time when I was trying to heal my gut, I'd go and sit at a family dinner and I would just happily just sit through it without eating, because I was just so determined to fix and heal myself and get to where I needed to be. But you can't live your whole life like that. And you have to have some balance at some point. And I love having fun. I like eating out and I enjoy having a social drink with my mates. And I like to live as well. But I just made a promise to myself that I would invest as much time as I needed to get to where I wanted to be, because maintaining is way easier than trying to fucking get to where you need to be, So I just made a promise that however long it took, whether it was 6 months, 12 months, whatever, to get my health back and to get my weight and everything where I wanted it to be, I would invest in that now and just get it done, because then you can go into more of a maintenance phase and find that balance again. But you can't really find that balance while you're trying to get there, I don't think.
Yeah, I love that, man. I was going to wrap the episode up, but you just brought something up for me that I did write down, and something you spoke about earlier, and I think it's a perfect time to bring it up, and that is seasons of life. And you just spoke about it, right? Like, you've had that 6 to 8 month period where you're like, right, I'm going to be really fucking disciplined. I'm going to dial everything in, and I'm doing it for this reason. Like, your why was strong enough to then figure out the how and, you know, the rest of the journey along the way. But as you said, like, you can't do that for the rest of your life. So I think that's an important takeaway for the listeners as well, is there are seasons of life, and there's going to be times where you need to dial everything in, and you need to be really strict. You need to be restrictive and disciplined to achieve the result that you want. But that might be like a 3-month block, and then you need to, you know, loosen the reins a little bit, you know, within reason, so that you can still live your life. You know, I say this all the time, man. I think we spoke about this in one of our first episodes, either you interviewing me or me interviewing you, about you know, gaining, maintaining, and minimizing the damage. I go through these phases where I'm in a maintenance phase for 6 to 8 months of the year, where, you know, I'm training because training makes me feel good, and I'm eating because, you know, the type of food that I'm eating because I've connected the dots. I've created this association with how these foods make me feel. You know, the decisions that I make on a daily basis, you know, going to bed at a certain time, switching off my phone at a certain time, going through my morning routine, you know, structure, discipline, training, nutrition, I make these decisions because I've connected the dots with how it makes me feel, right? But I'm not super restrictive. I'm not super disciplined with it. Like, I'm just living my life. I'm enjoying it. There's going to be, you know, 2 to 3 months every year where I'm like, all right, I'm in a game mentality. I've got a rugby tournament coming up. I'm going to start dialing in my nutrition, my training. I'm going to cut out the alcohol. I'm going to start counting calories, blah, blah, blah. I'm fueling for performance and recovery, blah, blah, blah. You know, that might be 2 to 3 months of the year. And then 2 to 3 months of the year, I'm in a minimize the damage phase where maybe I go back to Australia for, you know, a month for Anzac Day, a couple of weeks leading into it, maybe a week or so afterwards, where I'm not going to be training and I'm enjoying spending time with my family and friends, and I'm having a couple of beers and, you know, like loosening up on my diet a little bit, and my sleep patterns are all over the place. And, you know, it's not all or nothing. It's like, all right, what phase of life am I in? What season of life am I in? Yeah. Do you want to add anything to that?
Well, it's just banking the credit, right? It's like a relationship. It's like you have to bank enough credit to be able to withdraw. And it's a pretty simple equation, really. But if you've spent 5 years running your health into the ground, you can't turn it around in 3 months and then go back into a phase where you're partying up again. And I think that's the first step of that, is just being fucking honest with yourself about how long has it taken to get to where you are. Well, expect to put that back in. And when you frame it up and you're honest about it, and you just get your head around the fact that that's what you have to do, then that's great. Like, for me, like I said, I wasn't super unhealthy. I had some genuine underlying conditions going on, but I wasn't like super overweight or crazy out of shape or anything. And I knew I probably had a 6 month to 9 month window where I really had to dial in, and that was fine. I was like, cool, I'll do that. And I timed it. I was like, I'll do that right now, and I'll be able to enjoy my summer a bit, because we're coming into summer here. And I was like, I know that it's harder over summer, so I'm going to fucking do it in winter. And I just think it's just like thinking about it like a bank account in a relationship, man. Like, you can't withdraw more than you deposit. And you, in the way that you live your life, are making deposits every single day for most of the year. So when you need to withdraw a bit, you've got plenty in the bank.
Mate, I love that analogy. Just to start wrapping up, bro, picture behind you of Israel Adesanya. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, it's cool. It's my favourite piece. My mate, Kit Brown, Rassic Photography, he, like, I've been a fan of his since way before he was in the UFC and that. Watched one of his first fights in Wellington, actually, like Capital Punishment. And sort of just followed his journey, as most people in New Zealand have. Big fan. And me and Kit started watching a few of his fights. I got Kit into the UFC and to following him. And he had I remember we watched his first fight together and in the UFC, and then he got on it. And then he met it in Melbourne when he had the title fight against Rob Whittaker. Kit had just moved to Melbourne, and he's a great photographer. And he went to the Engage store and just like yelled out to Izzy. He was like, Izzy, and Izzy like turned around and just went like boom, and Kit just went bang, captured it. And then he's a good friend of mine, and we've been through a lot together, and he printed it out and framed it, got sent to me, so it's been on the office wall ever since.
That's sick, mate. What a cool story.
Yeah, man, and it's just I like having it there because I really admire Izzy's mindset, and so it's like one of those daily reminders when I look at that. It's cool because Kit took it and everything, but there's like he's a dude that inspires me as well. So
yeah, for sure. There's layers to that picture right there, mate.
Cool, man.
Love that. Hey, bro, I really appreciate your time, man. We've chatted for 3 hours this morning. It's 10 o'clock at night for you. I apologize for keeping you up, mate. Really appreciate your time. I appreciate you and everything that you bring, man. And always love catching up with you and connecting, mate.
Yeah, same, man. And I appreciate you giving me the platform to have a chat. And likewise, mate, it's been 3.5 hours or whatever it's been. It's been a pleasure, man. Don't know what else I'd rather do on my Friday night. So great awesome, to catch mate. Up, bro. And all the best with everything that you've got coming up as well.
Thanks, bro. Appreciate it. Much love, man. This episode was brought to you by Swiss 8, which is a proactive mental health program designed by veterans, initially for veterans, that has been pushed out to the wider community, that allows you to structure in and schedule their 8 pillars of health and wellness, including nutrition, sleep, time management, discipline, fitness, personal growth, mindfulness, and minimalism. This episode was also brought to you by Be Spunky, which is a male hormone optimization supplement that I've been taking for about 1.5 years, and I absolutely rate. It is a TGA listed nutraceutical, meaning that it's made from all organic produce to help you manage and optimize your stress levels, which in turn increases your ability to improve testosterone production levels naturally. Use the code COBES10 at checkout for your 10% discount. All of those links will be in the show notes. If you got some benefit from this episode, please make sure you pass it off to your friends and family. I'd appreciate any shares on social media platforms. If you tag me or if you share it to your stories, make sure you tag me so I can share that as well. Any 5-star ratings and reviews are much appreciated. Much love, guys. Peace.